Take the Leap is the podcast where we get real about the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship and life. Sure, some folks make running a business look like a walk in the park, but let's be honest, it's more like a wild ride through a theme park with a lot of unexpected twists and turns.
Join us, your co-hosts, Ashlan
and Tory,
as we spill the beans on our own real-life experiences and shine a spotlight on some amazing guests. From the highs of success stories to the lows of epic failures. And hey, we'll even throw in some cringe-worthy, laugh-out-loud, embarrassing moments for good measure.
So buckle up and tune in every Tuesday and Thursday for a dose of raw, unfiltered truth about what it's really like to chase your dreams and build a business.
Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just dipping your toes into the startup world, we've got something for everyone. Even if it's just to make you think, wow, I'm glad I didn't do what they did.
Welcome back, everybody. We're super excited to have today's guest, Fatima Jawaid Marty, an organizational strategist and policy and advocacy consultant who founded FJM Consulting. She is a seasoned advocate and policy wonk who has worked in federal advocacy-led state-based campaigns and is deeply experienced in implementation work with state and federal agencies. In 2022, after over a decade working in nonprofit organizations, Fatima pursued consulting work as a way to center her career on helping organizations and change makers build power in our communities and shift dominant and exclusive systems. Throughout her career, Fatima has collaboratively led organizations through the development and execution of programs and initiatives. With this expertise, FJM Consulting offers strategic guidance and support as organizations navigate change and growth, whether that is implementing a visionary new strategic plan, shifting programs to center community, or getting new projects off the ground. Fatima's work is rooted in sustainability and wants to ensure visions and movements are set up for the long haul through strategy, planning, and building infrastructure within an organization. At the forefront, Fatima's consulting work is the drive to create systems change through the fostering of community power. She truly believes that justice and movement work cannot be done without uplifting community voices and is passionate about ensuring folks who are impacted are integrated into all aspects of policy and advocacy work. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. I'm really inspired already by just reading out your bio because I resonate with so much of that in the nonprofit work that I do. And I feel like we could talk all about that side of things as well. But I wanted to give you the floor to tell us, what is your Take the Leap story? How did you get started in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, first I wanted to say just thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited for the conversations to come. I have to remind myself, we're having a dialogue and I can't just be like, ooh, let me pick your brain around that right now. But yeah, my Taking the Leap story is, I really wish I could say something beautiful and inspiring. I really just believed in myself and what I could achieve, and I just took the leap. But, the reality is that it was really necessary shift to care for myself. A couple of years ago, I was going through some pretty severe burnout. I was holding several roles, too many really for one person, and there was no end in sight to the workload. And there was just also a lot of negative work dynamics impacting me. I felt like I wasn't being heard or seen or recognized for my labor. And I was taking work home with me every single day. And all of the things in my life were suffering. I feel like I didn't have time for my partner. I feel like I didn't have time to connect with my friends, my support system, the people who usually help you through these moments, and was just really too exhausted to do anything besides numb out at the end of the day. And it really took a hit to my self-esteem. I didn't feel confident enough to apply for another job. And I really think it was a wake-up call that a what are you doing moment. This work, this job that you're centering your life around shouldn't be the sole focus of my life and can't be where I'm getting all my feelings of self-worth from. So I really, like, in that moment, asked myself what I needed, and what I really needed at the core of it was like, I just want to do my work. I love my work. I chose my career for a reason because I'm really passionate about systems change work, about trying to do my part to make the world feel marginally better for the people in it. And it was all the things around the work that were draining me. And so the question really became like, how do I move into something that allows me to focus on the work that aligns with my values, but also allows me to lead a life that like really gives me a chance to center the things that fuel me and that bring me joy. So really in that moment, like, I negotiated a shift to my employer at the time, and I'm so grateful that they were willing to support me and figure out a way to make it work. I went into a part-time contract role and was able to stay working on a campaign that was really deeply meaningful for me. And with that, like, I hit the first step. I was like, get out of full-time employment. But I was still trying to figure out what I was doing. I'm like, and I feel like there's certain things where you're like, oh, when people have a business, they do this and this. Is the things that I do around like strategy and like figuring out how to shape a thing, is that skill set really marketable? And then a few weeks later, another opportunity fell into my lap. And I felt like the universe really was telling me, like, here you go. we're with you in this as you move through it. Here's some ease. And like, just like that, I fell into the world of consulting. And I feel like there's like a thing that to note about my personality is sometimes I feel like I really do things in a non-linear way, and it was like no different. I always like knew from the beginning I was going to build a business, but those first couple of years I really needed to do some learning, and so my first 2 contracts ended up being more long-term, and I spent a lot of time learning about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, and then really getting comfortable with what I'm good at. I think that's a thing that no one ever tells you about this work, is like, you have to talk yourself up in a way and also believe in it, right? And that takes some time and some processing to get really like comfortable with that. And so when those contracts wrapped up, I took an intentional break to rebuild, and also just a like break to move across the country, which I have to constantly remind myself happened in that same time frame. I feel like everything just gets really muddled together. And taking the steps backwards to build back up was really helpful. I had time to craft my mission, to build a website, to meet with people and build relationships and be really intentional about the work I'm doing. It was a hard and grueling few months, but it really was also fulfilling. It also really involved a lot of unpaid work. That's also a part of consulting that I think, trying to recognize your work and labor, all of it is work. It's just what are the portions that you're getting paid for as well. And that really just takes me to where I am now, in a place where I've built something that feels really true to me, and I'm feeling very solid about where I'm going from here.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for listening. I feel like, sometimes I'm like, what is my narrative? And I'm like, my narrative is kind of the truth, right? Like, it's these hard moments that really push you forward and propel you a lot of times. So,
well, and I really liked what you said about, like, at first you said, I wish I had this really inspirational story or something like that. But I think the truth is that you do. And because you're telling it like it was, I think so many people, have this like dream idea of what it's going to be like to go into entrepreneurship. But a lot of people honestly go into it because of that need, because they hit burnout. I feel like, especially in the nonprofit world, people are constantly hitting that burnout, and they're realizing, I can't do this the way I'm doing. I can't live life the way I'm living it right now. I need something different. And so I think for a lot of people, entrepreneurship started because out of necessity, whether it's for health or for financial reasons, or because they're growing their family. I think it really started from that need. And so I think sharing that with people and being real about that is really inspirational, because, it's real.
Yeah, I was going to add
Yeah.
that too. I love the way that you said that you took those first two contracts to figure out what it was, because I feel like, especially in nonprofit work, we have so much poured onto us. Like most nonprofit workers, like their job description is what would be split into like three people's like corporate job, positions, and going like deep into certain skill sets. And so I think one of the things that I value through entrepreneurship is being able to say, like, these are the things that I'm super solid good at, and here's the stuff that I don't do, but like finding folks that you can partner with and pair up with that maybe they do the other thing that you don't do, and then creating this kind of collaborative container that you can have going out there into the world, but being able to focus on your own strengths and not needing to feel bad that like I suck at this particular part of my job, but it's like because my job description is, 4 pages long of random stuff that had to be put somewhere in the nonprofit as well.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much because I think, it's just how nonprofits are set up, right? They're not funded, they can't have as much staff as they really need to be able to do the work. And they're really, biting off so much important work. And then it just ends up at the bottom, at the end of the day, just being shoved into one person's lap. And I feel like, you know, but that's not a place where we're kind of operating in our best selves, right? We owe it to ourselves to always be like, what am I really good at, and what can I leverage with someone else? What can someone else bring to the table? Because I think that's what you said was really beautiful, of like, when I am a consultant, I'm like, I'm not walking in as an expert. I'm not here to be like, ooh, I solved your problem. That thing you didn't think of, here it is on a shiny platter, right? It's like, how can I take what's in your brain and like morph it and work together and collaborate on something and build something really good? Because I think you're also able to have this intentional time to do it, and you're outside an organization, so you're not really working against the same constraints too.
Absolutely. That's so true. Knowing what you know now, what is a piece of advice or something you would say to yourself when you first started out, just kind of going through everything you went through?
Yeah, I really love this question. I'm always like, if I could go back and tell past Fatima something, like that would be amazing. But someone gave me this advice around advocacy and movement work a long time ago, and I really think it applies here. And like, it's so simple. Like, they told me it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think running a business is not something that just happens. It's done. You did it. Look at all the amazing work and success you have. Yay, it's going to be here forever. It really takes hard work to both build it and sustain it. And there's going to be moments where you're busy. Then there's going to be slow moments too. And it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of patience. And it's a lot of like really being okay where things are rather than where you want them to be. And like, when I was mentioning before, when I took my intentional pause to start up again, I really had these preconceived notions around how long the process would take to get back up and running again and have a full roster of clients. And then when that didn't happen immediately, like the doubt started to set in, like that big creeping voice that makes you start to question what you're doing and if you're on the right path and if the risk of going your own way is going to pan out. And no one ever tells you that there are the moments that the doubt are going to be really, really loud sometimes. And then it's really up to you to decide how much you're going to listen to it. And I feel like for me, eventually, the work started coming in again and everything was fine. And I really wish I could go back to me in that moment and be like, chill out. It's okay. This is just a part of it. The work is always going to ebb and flow. And I feel like one of the things, where we're talking about, I really appreciate these these conversations with people who are entrepreneurs and going their own way. I was in a space recently with some other consultants, and one of them was gracious enough to admit to me that when they're slow phases of work, they get really depressed and hard on themselves. And I was like, yes, I wish that people would talk about this more. When I tell people I run my own nonprofit consulting business, I feel like they expect me to be like, it's amazing and glamorous all the time. And sometimes it is. Sometimes I end a work day or finish a project and I feel really energized. I feel really fulfilled by what I'm working on. And I really can't imagine a world in which I'm going back into full-time employment or working for someone else. And then there's other days where I'm like, do I know what I'm doing? Do other people think that I know what I'm doing? Oh my God, what am I doing? And I wish we talked about that part more because it happens to all of us. It's just like a very human thing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I can't, I mean, I feel like people glamorize it so much, especially when you like look on Instagram and TikTok and you have like all those people showing day in my life of, being a small business owner. And it's always really like everything's very neat and orderly and everyone's having a really great time and they wake up early and have their breakfast and coffee and then, get started. And I'm like, if you were to really look at a day in my life on like a weekly basis, I would say like maybe on one of those days would I have my shit together. Maybe. But for the most part, like 99.9% of the time, I don't. Every day is, just it is what it is. And yeah, I wish people showed, like you said, the real parts of that because we don't always feel 100% every day, or sometimes you don't have energy. And then other days you feel on top of the world and it's just, you can't predict what it's going to be like all the time. And that's okay. That's part of it.
Yeah, I just had a conversation this morning with a client where I was just like, I'm sorry, I haven't written the things for that campaign yet. My brain just hasn't been in it, And she's like, that's totally okay. I get it. It's hard sometimes. And I'm like, because I know we're not going to launch it till like later in July and we're trying so hard to be ahead. But I was just like, it's just not feeling it right now. I'm like, I'll keep it's just like, yeah, if you need to push it, I guess, that makes sense. But I also have this problematic thing of I like having like drop dead deadlines because like if I know I absolutely have to do it by Friday, I will get it to you as 4:59 p.m. on Friday. If you give me that point, there's something about like the very tip tap last end of things. But then sometimes I will have a really easy time getting so far ahead on something and I'll be like, oh, that's been done for ages and ages, and we just have to double triple check everything beforehand. And that's really how it can go in waves as an entrepreneur. And it's the peril of controlling all your own time. You can be on
right
and not sometimes.
No, and I feel like we're just fed so much around like you said, like on Instagram, or there'll be like a TV show about someone becoming their own boss and it's super just like this glamorous thing. And I really feel like what you're saying, like we're humans, we have things that we're good at, we have things that we're not good at, but somehow when you go out on your own and you're an entrepreneur, I feel like I didn't expect how much of all of that would come back at me, where it feels so glaring. You don't have really the backup of a team or a bunch of people to be like, oh, here's these things, or oh, can you move this along, right? It's just you and yourself and I feel like I love in the moment where you're like told a client you couldn't do something at that time and they're like, okay, right? Because all of that internal stuff was coming from in here, right? And it wasn't maybe necessarily real, that pressure, right? So I feel like it's so important to just remind ourselves that and just be a little more easy and gracious for ourselves.
Yeah. And expect that the people that you communicate with are going to understand. Like I feel like I've been really blessed with super understanding clients. Like I've been telling them all, like my brain is on moving and getting as much as I can get done to move, and they're like, we get it, So it's been nice, and I think it's different. You had reflected on kind of the toxic cultures within organizations. I don't know what it is about being on the outside that causes people to act differently, or maybe it's the way that we interact because we're like, big whoop, fire me. You know what I mean? I'll be sad because we've been doing such great work together, but like at the same time sacrificing, your health and well-being and your principles for something is not worth, staying with a bad client relationship as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really agree with that too, because I feel like that is the other side. I know we've been talking about the non-glamorous sides, but I think sometimes, right, there's those moments where you have confidence, you're like, yeah, I don't need that energy in my life. Oh, I'm gonna, if I say no to them or they say no to me, something else is gonna come my way, and you get to have that choice. And I feel like it's that building of like personal power that I think is on the tail end too, that like everything is choice and everything is around sorry, I lost my train of thought on that one. Things happen.
That's okay.
Moment in the making of not being perfect all the time.
Awesome. Well, I will do the last of our kind of standard round of questions before we get into the hot seat. You've given us little bits and pieces of it, but would love to hear from you. What's your why? What is your why behind the work that you do through your business?
Yeah. When I first saw that question, I was like, what is my why? And I had to think a little bit about it, but I realized, really in some shape or form, it is a question I return to a lot. And especially in the moments that I was talking about where the doubt is really high, because you sometimes need, as you like get through your workday, like those moments that reignite your passion and remind you, why you're doing the things that you're doing and why you're so invested in building your own business. And early on, like I wrote a list of all the whys, and returning to it, like grounds me, because it's a reminder that this transition really is about putting my values into action. And one thing about me too is I don't know why I never throw away my work notebooks. I just have a stack of them. I don't know what to do with them. So I actually looked back on that list before this conversation. It was really helpful to be like, oh yeah, all of this is still true. And a lot of it is personal. It's better for my mental health. It allows me to establish better workplace boundaries. Like Ashlan, you were saying, sometimes those dynamics just come up and you don't know what it is about a group, but they're there. And I'm able to get more equitable pay for myself. I like setting my own schedule. It gives me far better work-life balance. And like, frankly, I rest more in this phase of my life, and I'm all about resting these days. And then there's the work side of it. Like, I've never been one to spend my time doing anything that I wasn't invested in. I do believe strongly in justice-driven work, and that running my own business allows me to center my values without any of that extra organizational constraints and internal dynamics. And I have a really deep commitment to building inclusive and equitable systems. And I really do believe policies shouldn't exist that don't center communities. And I, to my very core, do believe like a better future is possible. And so being my own boss really allows me to be choosy, to pick work that is in alignment with that vision, and to work with people who believe in that too. So those are my whys.
Love that. I resonate with so much of what you have said too. And as a sidebar conversation, I will send you some things that would match up really well for your social change work and centering community work as well with the nonprofit client that I work with. But so beautifully said. And I feel like both Tori and I, having been in nonprofits before, can completely relate to being able to really work on the things you're truly at the core passionate about on the other side. So thank you for sharing that. And we are now on to the hot seat questions, which I know Tori is up first.
Yes. So taking a completely different turn here. What is the best and or worst piece of advice you've ever received in your career?
It took me a second to think about this, and I feel like one of the things, and I don't know if it's just a reaction that I had myself, because like I said, I am a person who like if I don't like what I'm doing, I just don't do it. And if something needs to shift, then I shift it. But if I'm in a moment, I'm contributing 100% to that moment, and I'm going to work as hard as I can, because like I don't know how else to be. And I'm like, that's not even talking myself up. I'm just like, I'm just an intense person. I don't know what to say. But I remember someone told me when I was in this moment of burnout, and that I was working with, and was really just like, have you ever just thought about like not doing it, or doing it halfway, or just dropping it? And I was like, what? What are we even talking about? Because I think so much, right, in like the work that I do right now, it's about systems work. And I think about that a lot, where I'm just like, if you're setting someone up not for success, and your reaction to that is just like, do it halfway, or drop it, or don't do it at all, then why are we doing it at all, right? Like if we want to think intentionally about the work that we're doing, and we want to make sure that we have an impact, then that maybe that work just falls away and doesn't exist, right? Instead of putting it back on me and being like, oh, well, just don't try as hard this time. And yeah, I feel like I just had a reaction when I heard that.
No, that's good. And I love that question, because I feel like we've just gotten such a wide variety of responses to that. Some people can't think of a bad one, but they can think of some good advice, or vice versa. Or they're like, well, I had this really weird thing happen. And yeah, I love that question, because just the answers we get have just been really fun.
Oh, I've had people say that to me before too. Just like, just do it like part of the way. And it's just like, that doesn't work. Like, you still like, I don't know if it's my, like, I don't want to be judged by a piece of work that wasn't like the full thing
Right.
that I could do. And yeah, and I've always thought about that, like, it's kind of karma, right? It comes back to like bite you. And so don't do the thing that you wouldn't want done to you. So yeah, try a little less as hard.
Right.
I've heard that before, and I'm just like, I don't know. Either that, or I would just like not do it at all. That I think I could live with the don't do it at all, but like do it half-ass just is like not is totally not a thing in my capabilities.
Exactly. Okay. I just feel like exactly, like I feel like that don't do it at all is so easy to access and just like put it over there. And I feel like so much in my, just like how I am, I worry so much about being complacent, especially when you're doing mission driven work. And I'm like, when is the downslide then? When is the moment where like that sets in, and it's not this one project, it's all of the projects? And just like, and if we are trying to do work that we're passionate about, like, then let's not do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That totally makes sense.
Okay, so I have
All
the
right.
next question. So on your website, you write, I believe that organizations are filled to the brim with experts and change makers. I believe that the best visions are co-created. I believe in follow through and creating work that is set up for long-term sustainability. I believe that revolutions happen through the culmination of 1,000 tiny things, and by slowing down to take the necessary steps to get there. I honestly really resonated with that quote. And I think it's like buried at the bottom of one of your pages. And I was like, oh my God, that's so powerful. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, or one of the things that I've experienced in working with nonprofits, is this constant shift to chasing one shiny object after another, all with a sense of urgency. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the ways that you've seen co-creation work successfully, so that we're not kind of doing that, here's the new shiny thing, but we're actually building something long-term, lasting, and sustainable within organizations.
Yeah. Before I answer that specifically, I think I'll back up a little bit too, because I think there's so much when I'm working with clients at nonprofits and you're doing the work, it feels like it's in this work bucket and it's over here, and it's like, this is the thing, this is XYZ that we're supposed to do. And then if you have like a conversation, an honest conversation with someone around like, what are you doing the work and what's the vision? And like, and they'll say it, they'll be like, this is like where where we're going. This is the big part, the thing that I really believe in. Right. And I feel like so often in just, nonprofits, because again of what I was talking about before, right, where we're always coming up against having to prove your work, having to get funding year by year and trying to like really express, the projects that you're doing and stuff that isn't sustainable. I think it allows us to start thinking in these really like compartmentalized ways. And I do feel like a lot of the co-creation work and a lot of the work is like really tapping into that vision and saying, can we back up for a second? And can we really think about why this project exists? I know that it's in a grant and I know that you wanted to do it, but there was a part of you a few years ago or a year ago that really deeply believed in it, and it wasn't a project, and you thought that it had intention and value. And what is that? How do we build back into that vision? And I feel like that's one of the things that I think about. And just when you say when co-creation, when does it work well? I think for me, it really works well when I can just honestly like steward those visions along and tap back into that and be like, how do we introduce intentionality back into this? And, as we're talking about, I think about this, maybe not the best selling of my services, or maybe it is, right? I feel like in a perfect world where everyone had a reasonable workload and was able to do all the things that they set out about within their workday, they could probably, do it themselves. And like, because I think I believe that so deeply, like in writing that, I feel like sometimes I'm like, okay, I have to write the things that I really honestly believe is true, because I do believe that like nonprofits, all organizations are filled with people who have really great visions, who really care deeply about people and really want the best for them. And so how do I then become the person that can lend that capacity to you, that can be the person that helps move it along, who isn't in your organization and isn't balancing a bunch of things, but really able to help you see your vision and then carry it along the way too? I'm not fully sure if that answers your question, but it's what came up for me.
No, that's really great. And I think it broke down kind of the different ways that you approach the work. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for that. And just to kind of expand a little bit, similarly related, when you're working with organizations, what sorts of obstacles do you usually encounter? What are some common challenges you face when you're working with an organization and trying to implement new policies and procedures and changes? Can you share any lessons you've learned from some of those challenging instances?
Yeah, I really love that question because, and I think, and as I say this, and there's going to be someone out there in the universe and being like, oh, this is her opinion on me. But the reality is that everything is challenging. Nothing is easy. And I think one of the things that I encounter, right, is this feeling that something's going to be easy or it's not going to take as long as you think it'll take. And I do have this habit in my work of being like, everything triple how long that you're going to take, because I feel like those are some of the dynamics of like, well, you have a vision or you have an idea and then you're trying to move it forward. And I've had this moment with clients before, and then all of a sudden there'll be a barricade because there wasn't enough time to really think through what we're moving through. And then it's like, oh, we don't have enough funding. Oh, we didn't really think about who was doing that. Or, oh, yeah, this was just a document, but actually I realized that all of our staff is not in alignment around this. And now we have to like back up and have all these conversations and get us here. And I think those are some of the things that I feel like I really try to set up in the beginning of like things aren't going to go as you expect them to. And that's just like the reality of work. And I feel like that was one of the things that I've really set up before I even enter into a relationship with someone. I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, here's Fama with all her questions. But I now have an intake sheet where I have a bunch of questions around the work that they do. And then when we do a consultation, I'm like, well, have you thought about, who's going to carry this work forward? Or have you thought about funding? And does that need to be a piece of it? Because I feel like those are the moments where I think you can really bog down and get slowed down, or the work just doesn't ever lift off the ground. And I feel like trying to take those intentional steps myself to like help folks move through that and help think about the things and do that planning and that infrastructure work to like make sure stuff is not going to just fall off the radar, because that doesn't feel good to anyone, right? Like you want to be able to accomplish the things that you set out to do.
Absolutely.
I know it's also the boring part, right?
But it's so important. I feel like, I think that's, especially if you are an entrepreneur that has like a service-based business and you're going to be like contracting with companies and taking on new clients, like it's so important to make sure it's the right fit. And the only way to do that is to ask those questions. And it's a disservice to yourself, but it's also a disservice to your clients if you take on someone knowing full well they're not going to implement what you're doing. Like it doesn't feel good to you. It doesn't feel good to them to have spent the money and know that you didn't accomplish something because you weren't on the same page to start with. So I think it's super important. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I really love hearing your experiences too, because I do feel like that's one of the things of like, maybe we aren't a good fit for each other. And I feel like I try to like frame that, like, maybe I'm not what you're looking for, and that's okay. That's not on me and that's not on you. But I think too, as a consultant, because you're like, or an entrepreneur too, like you're navigating a world where you're your own siloed entity. And I feel like sometimes that allows you to see those dynamics more clearly because you're not in it. And sometimes you can see like, oh, okay, you're saying this, but I actually have a theory that you're actually on step A when you think you're on step F. And like, and when you have those moments, I've had moments where I'm like, I have that theory and I'm just going to jam it through. And then I was like, oh, I should have trusted myself, because now I'm at a place where I'm not as motivated, or I'm doing a disservice to you because I'm frustrated, but it would have been a better service to the both of us if we just hashed this out in the beginning and kind of navigated those conversations.
Right.
And sometimes it means you push work off for yourself, right? But I just, like we were saying, like doing the work that you really care about, sometimes that's part of it, of being like, okay, you take this a little further and then come back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, kind of in the same vein, instead of talking about challenges, can you share with us what has been one of your favorite projects to work on, or one of the favorite things that you've been able to do since starting your consultancy?
Yeah. I wish I could talk more. I guess I can use an example. I think one of my first clients that I was working on a policy campaign, and I really cared about it so much. And being able to, it was around expanding food access to excluded immigrants from our food benefit programs. And running that campaign was one thing, but then at the end of it, I had this moment where I feel like when I was working with the organization around like what's going to come next, or how do we think about building new campaigns in the future, and like being able to like sit in a space and kind of share the things that I learned out of it, and being able to sit in a room, right? I was doing a workshop. This was part of the wrap up of doing a workshop around like, how do you pick policy initiatives? How do you build them up? And it felt like there was so much energy in that space around like, I think we should do this, or here's this this idea that I have, how do we move it forward? How do we conceive it? And I think those are the things that give me the most energy, because I feel like when I talk about like collaborating with organizations, like I'm here to support you. I'm here to support your learning. Sometimes, especially a lot of the work that I do is like, I like new things. I like projects that are just getting off the ground that you haven't fully visioned out, that you don't know, but there's that idea, there's that nugget, and you're trying to get it off the ground. And really being able to like that spark, and to be able to see people's ideas come into fruition, like that, I think is really beautiful to be a part of that. And I think really in being able to like see the way that folks' mechanisms work and the way that they're thinking through things, and then like to be able to like help steward that along is kind of I feel like that becomes like one of the most meaningful things, because I'm like, I don't know anything sometimes. Sometimes I know things and sometimes I do know things, but I sometimes feel like other people know a lot of great things too. And how can that, how can I really like, how can I support you in this? And how is this a learning process for the both of us? Because then you can carry this forward on your own without me. Because I'm just a consultant, I'll leave eventually, and this is really just important to the organization and to the community, that it like gets the fire that it needs to keep going. I lost my train of thought in the middle of that. I apologize.
Okay, no, I'm tracking.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, getting to kind of our last question here, you'd kind of briefly touched on this earlier. And when we were talking about your Take the Leap story and how it kind of started from a place of burnout. And so I guess I just wanted to ask you, the work you're doing right now is amazing. And, you're really making a difference, and it's impactful, and that's really, really cool. How do you, because the work that you're doing can also bring about burnout, it can bring about, maintaining your mental health and things like that. So what are some things that you do to not be overwhelmed and to maintain your well-being and your mental health so that you don't go back into a place of burnout, working for yourself, but still doing similar work?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think, movement work is hard. I feel like every day you're just confronted with another reality around like how hard things are, or just trying to convince other people to care about people fundamentally. I just feel like takes a lot out of you sometimes. And I just really love that. And love that question. And this is really, again, just another pitch about like everyone should be an entrepreneur. But I think really being able to set up all the spaces around myself to support me have been really helpful, right? One of the things that I do to myself, even when I think that I should take it away, I'm like, I don't work on Fridays. If I have a lot of work, I'll do it in that 4-day work week. I don't work on Fridays. That is my space to like be able to recharge. And I feel like sometimes that like doubt comes up where I'm like, I have more work to do, but hold that. That's your sacred space of like, if the work that you're doing is always going to sit a little differently on your heart, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you, especially in policy work, you build a campaign and it doesn't pass. And the message you hear is like, we didn't care about that enough to like move it forward. And it's really disheartening, right? And it's really hard to like want to keep going. But I also feel like in the goodness too, right? Like we have to remember the joy. We have to remember what are the good things that I have, or the good things that like I have in my support system that I can take time to fuel me and remind myself why I'm working towards those things. And I feel like when I had my break where I was trying to rebuild, I had this moment where I was like, you can't work 40 hours a week on just like building your business. That's ridiculous. You're just eventually at some point creating work for yourself. And one of the things that I did, and I still try to integrate now, is I had a morning routine where I like sat down. I'm like, I'll make my coffee. The cat and I hang out in the sunroom. I'll do a little bit like of a gratitude practice and I'll meditate, and then I'll just read a book or play a game on my phone. Like, it's not all these like beautiful like ideals of how things are. And then I'll exercise, and then I'll go back into my day. And for the first couple of weeks, I was like, you're just wasting time. What are you doing? You should be doing X thing and X thing. And then I started to just be like, oh, I didn't get to do that because I had a meeting with someone and I really craved it and I like looked forward to it the next day. And so I think those are one of the things where now I just have like an hour blocked off on my calendar in the morning where I'm able to do that, take a longer lunch, and I exercise in the day, and just like all of the things that like feel like I can like feed my body and like be able to take the space to do, because I set my own schedule, right? Like if I'm getting work done, it doesn't matter if it's at 8:00 at night because I allowed myself to take a half hour earlier in the day to take a walk to the lake. I can do that, and it gives me that fuel to keep going when things get hard.
I love that answer.
I like that example. Oh, I'm envisioning having no meetings on Fridays. That's like my ultimate goal. I just had a conversation with a client. I was like, hey, we could move our meetings. And she was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And I was like, yes, one down, a few more to go off the Fridays. So I love that. And it's something that I want to get to now that I have folks on my team that are taking over more and more work, to just have that time. Not that I don't necessarily will not necessarily do work, but just to have like Fridays as like a no meeting day would just be so brilliant as well. So thanks so much for sharing that. And I think that is something that I want to tell entrepreneurs to think about. Is like, how can you create those spaces to do the things that we don't end up doing when we are showing up for a job at 8 and like leaving at 5 every day, right? It's weird for folks to have that time in that space. Or I've told people, I was like, yeah, sometimes I'm on later at night because I like decided to go to Costco at a not busy time for Costco because it's more fun that way to not deal with the madness that it is. So thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
We really hope that our audience liked hearing this and appreciated it. And we wanted to give you an opportunity to plug anything that you want, or where can people find you if they want to continue engaging with you after this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I often am really bad at like plugging myself and marketing, but this is part of it. You can find me on my website, fjmstrategy.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and yeah.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Awesome.
It's perfect.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. If you have comments or questions, send us a direct message on Instagram, or you can always email us at aloha@taketheleap-today.com. And we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Take the Leap podcast. We hope you found useful takeaways you can apply to your entrepreneurial journey. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and keep in touch and follow us on Instagram. If you have business questions, shoot us a direct message or leave us a comment. We'll try to cover it in an upcoming episode. And visit our website, taketheleap-today.com, for more resources like our online course that accompanies this podcast.